My name is Kayleen Dirksen, and I'm the president of the Soul Care Institute. I'd like to introduce you to Jessie Vangsness, who is not yet a student, but will be joining the Soul Care Institute in 2025. And I've asked her to sit down with some of our alumni and current students and ask them what it is like to go through the Soul Care Institute and what she has to look forward to. So that's what you're about to enjoy. Soul Care Institute Reflections with Jessie Vangsness.
Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Soul Care Institute Reflection Series. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Joe Chambers. He resides in Buena Vista, Colorado, and he is a father, and he is a husband of 43 years, and he's the head pastor at a church in Colorado. It's called Mountain Heights, and we are just going to jump right in. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
So let's jump into you explaining a little bit about the Hideaway in Colorado. What was that? What was the location like? Your lodging, the way that you were welcomed?
Yeah, so it was at Divide, which is outside of Colorado Springs, at Aspen Ridge, where the barn. Everybody that is around in that time knows about the barn. And when I walked in, Steve was eating with somebody, and he waved me over, and he said, "You're going to sit beside me." And he said, "This is Joe Chambers. He's from the Seattle area, and Joe has an incredible story." Then he asked me to just introduce myself, but he made me feel like I was the most important person in the room. And that was just a really, I think Steve and Gwen too, has a real gift of making you feel seen and known and wanted. And that was very helpful for me because I didn't know anybody in the room. I don't remember how many were there, maybe 15. And I didn't know a soul, but I'd had some interaction with Steve. And so he just really welcomed me. And that was a wonderful experience. That place is very special and beautiful. All our retreats were there at Aspen Ridge. So to me, it's a very special place.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, from the interviews that I've done and spoken to people about their time in Colorado, it's breathtaking and peaceful and comfortable and homey and just all of the above. When you made the decision to join the Soul Care Institute, where were you at personally? Like, what did your soul need by committing to a program like this, committing to going on retreat?
Yeah, what might be a little different about me than others, I don't know that it is, but I have been reading Henry Nouwen, Richard Foster, Dallas Willard, Thomas Merton. I've been reading these contemplative writers for years. And what I was really wanting was some sort of organized model or approach to doing soul care. I'd been caring for my soul for a long time because of a necessity, because I had just about bankrupted my life and I did not have a guide. I was just reading anything that felt like it would touch my soul. Ken Geyer, and I stumbled upon Steve Smith, and all of those resonated. And I went, I want to get better and have a more cohesive approach to doing soul care, not only for myself, but also for how I might share this with others. But where I was is I wanted a model or a process. What I was surprised to find out was that I was not going to be trained at the Soul Care Institute on how to go about giving soul care away. That surprised me. What I learned was how to even deepen the approach to soul care I had for myself. And at first I was a little like, that's not really kind of what I'm hoping for. I was hoping for some training on how to give it away, but there's some genius behind it. And the genius is that I have a unique way of people that might have been hindered had I had to adopt Joe Walters or Kayleen Dirksen's or Steve Smith's way. I mean, I had my way. And so when I dove deep into all of the reading and the reflection papers and the listening groups and the teachers that we had. I had to find my own way of doing that. And I think it was genius on their part for not having a particular model. It was more, these are some of the things that you need to know. The other thing that was fascinating to me, to be honest with you, is that I don't know if they do it now, but then they had required reading and then they had suggested reading. And you had to read these 6 books, for this quarter or whatever. What I found fascinating is that on the required reading, I had read most of them. And so all of my required reading became, for the most part, the suggested reading. So I went down even deeper into it. And that was wonderful for me because it made me learn to read James Martin and Cynthia Held and some people that I had never read and would never have read. Belden Lane, different writers that I probably would not have read had I not had to go to that second level. So that was wonderful for me. But my soul was in a pretty healthy place. I was looking for training. What I got was, while your soul may be healthy, it could still be deeper. And so that's what was so beautiful for me about the Soul Care experience, the Soul Care Institute, is that it caused me to even deepen and strengthen some of the pathways that I'd already kind of gone down.
I'm so glad you said that. And it's exciting to hear, even in your experience, although you wanted training, your soul received a deepening. And that from that, you were formed in a way that eventually, I know you gave it away. You learned to share it with others. So that's really cool. Why don't you tell us about a memorable retreat that you had? I know there's 6 of them. Was there one that stood out where you really experienced what you learned? Certain memories of that you want to share?
Oh, yeah. I'll give you a couple. One was the instructors. All of them were amazing. But I really resonated with Howard Baker. He was one of our instructors, and maybe it's because we're similar age, but he really resonated with me. But the person who probably made me think the deepest and moved me the most was Tara Owens. She came and taught about race relations and sexuality and spiritual direction and all of those things that she is so well equipped to teach. And I remember as an older man, this young woman blew me away with her intellect, the depth of her observations. I was in awe of her as a minister. And that was very memorable to me. So just experiencing Tara was pretty powerful and very profound. But I'll tell you another one. So I had a listening group, and there was a particular, I don't think I'll call her name just because I don't have permission to share this, but she was in our listening group, and she came to one of the retreats, and she was a little bit late. I think it was snowing outside. And she stepped into the barn. When she stepped into the barn, I was standing beside the door, and I saw her. I turned to her and I called her by name. She came over to me to hug me, and then just kind of collapsed in my arms and began to sob. And she said, I couldn't get here fast enough. And what she was sharing was that a lot of things had happened in her world back in her home church, in her own personal life, and she needed to get to a city of refuge. She needed to get to a safe place. And she told me, she said, I just needed to get to the Soul Care Institute. And the first person that saw her was the one that got her. And so I held her, and then some of the other listening groups saw that, and they came over, and we all had a huddle there. But it was about feeling welcomed and safe and vulnerable and supported, all in one giant hug at the door. And I'll never forget that to this day, and I don't think she will either. So it was a beautiful moment of connection and community.
It certainly sounds like it. I love to hear that sense of safety, like you said, that knowing a place is a refuge and is a place you can let it all go. You don't have to hold on to the stress that you've been carrying in your normal circles. I think the Soul Care Institute, at least I hope, I believe that it's going to be that for me. And, it's just beautiful what you described. So on the note of community and listening groups, can you say a little bit more about some of the time together, whether it was in the groups or eating together or walking together?
Well, the listening groups were wonderful because I got to meet people I probably wouldn't have put myself in that group. If you have affinities and you go into a room, you're naturally kind of drawn to this person or that. I probably would not have chosen everybody in this group, and they turned out to be exactly who I needed to be with. From a retired Presbyterian pastor to a young woman in her early 30s, all points in between. And we shared pretty openly about our stories. We got to listen to each other's stories and supported each other. And we're all connected today, over social media or different ways. So that was beautiful. I also remember another beautiful part that brought a lot of koinonia and fellowship is on the last night of the retreat. This, I think, was a Joel Walters thing, former president. We would go up to a fire pit, but we sat around the campfire and told stories and drank libations and just enjoyed being brothers and sisters in Christ and the conviviality and the sacramental moment of being with smoke in our eyes and sparks flying up into the sky and cold and huddling and telling each other incredible stories. So that's a beautiful memory of mine about the things that happened away from the teaching time, if you will.
Wow. Yeah. Isn't there something about flames and whether it's a bonfire or a fire in the fireplace, just that gathers people and stories come out, and especially towards the end of a retreat, just a celebratory time of enjoying fellowship, and so good.
I would also like to add another thing, if you don't mind. So I got to spend time with two spiritual directors. I'd never experienced spiritual direction before. And so when it was offered with Howard Baker, I took it. And when it was offered with Tara Owens, I took it. And that really got me hooked on the necessity of having an Anam Cara. I see the book behind you there, and having a soul friend. And to this day, I have a spiritual director, mostly because I had a positive experience in those moments of opportunity at the Soul Care Institute with Tara and Howard.
Yeah, thank you for sharing about the spiritual direction. I know Kayleen shares about this in an interview I did with her. Tell me a little bit about the afternoons of silence and solitude. You have space between groups, and everybody uses that time differently. What was that like for you?
Yeah, unique to Aspen Ridge and where the barn was, they had a prayer trail, and there were stations, if you will, along this prayer trail. And I think if you took the whole prayer trail, it's 35 acres, so it might take you an hour and a half to 2 hours to kind of walk the trail. I never did that. I would go find one of those stations and then just spend the time there, often with a journal. And if the weather was pleasant, and it usually was, I would sit and look at Pikes Peak and read and write and pray and just be very aware of the beauty of the outdoors. There's one particular place on the property, I forget what they call it, but it was a giant boulder about the size of, I don't know, a Volkswagen Bug. And it had a crack in it, a split in it. And then there was a little level place, and you could actually sit in that cleft of that rock. And because I'm a big guy, it was tight for me to get in there, but it had this feeling of being held. And I went to that on more than one occasion because of just the sense of being held by the rock. And I love that part. So those times in the afternoon, I either took a nap or I went for one of those stations, those benches, and spent some time with the Lord there.
I have heard about this rock.
They have a name for it, but I don't know what it's called. Is it called the Cleft? It might be the Cleft. I forgot now, but been there a few times.
Yeah. Steve did share with me what that spot's like. Since you've been doing soul care for a long time, even before the Soul Care Institute, do you have any advice for me coming to the Soul Care Institute for the first time, how to really show up and be present, how to order days, anything to pay attention to? Do you have any thoughts on that?
It's a really good question. Yeah, I think, I always look at things and see, would I do something a little different? And one of the things I think I would do different if I had an opportunity to do it again is to not come with preconceived ideas of what I ought to be getting. Come with more of an open hand and an open heart. I wanted, like I said earlier, I wanted training. I didn't get training. And so I had to work through my own little bit of disappointment that I didn't get what I'd come for. But what I got was better than what I intended to get. So I would say manage those expectations in the sense of you don't know exactly what God wants to give you. Just go with a lot more open hand and open heart. I would also say don't be late. It sounds silly, but when your plane gets late and you're late, it puts me in a harried moment or a harried disposition. And that's really not conducive to going and finding rest if you're going there harried. Now, if you're stumbling there, you're stumbling there, But I think because of lack of good management on my part, I ended up coming a couple of times late, and it felt like I was having to hurry up to rest.
That's really good advice. The not having specific expectations gives you the opportunity to experience everything that it is and will be without having to battle the disappointments or the confusion of, wait, this isn't what I thought,
Yeah, and I would add to that, I would come as curious as I could possibly be. To me, that is an underrated value that I have not had for very long. And so if I were to go today, I would be curious as to why are these people in my listening group, Lord? Help me be curious about this. Let me just sit with this. This is a fascinating group of personalities. Not try to analyze it, but just be curious. This is interesting, and let it unfold. So those are a couple of other things I think I wouldn't trade my listening group for anybody, but it's not who I would have chosen. And it's just who God chose, God and Joe Walters.
Yeah, it's good to know that he's the one really in control here and you're supposed to be. So good. So you mentioned different personalities and, it made me think about the theme of true self, false self that is often covered in Retreat 2 and then again in 3. Is there any part of understanding the true self, the inner life, that you discovered or gained from your time at the Institute?
Well, I guess part of those teachings reveal to me how active and alive the false self still is within me if I'm not on my game. So that was a bit of a surprise for me as we dug a little deeper, and I can't remember exactly what was said or which instructor shared it, but I remember going, I still have a lot of work to do right here. And that was good for me to know. But that false self, true self, that's the journey of a lifetime. And in figuring out how to come and be present as your own self, which is who God wants to know, is the most important part of our journey in many ways.
Absolutely. Yeah, showing up, just being curious and knowing that discovering the parts of you that are the truest essence of who he made you to be is that journey. It's definitely a journey, just unpacking those different aspects. And I look forward to going deeper into it as I experience the different retreats. If I were to ask you who you were before entering the Soul Care Institute and who are you becoming now?
I asked someone, if they were to write my eulogy, could I read it before I died? I did this about 2 years ago. And he said, sure. So he wrote a eulogy for me. And that's a strange ask, but he said that the thing that he remembered most about me in my life, he said he was going through a really hard time in his church. He was going through a really hard time, and his wife had cancer, and he was just struggling. And he went to a place, and the person at the front of the room said, Joe Chambers is here, and he's here to offer soul care if any of you want to spend some time. He'll be in room such and such. And that's where I was. And he walked in, I introduced myself, and this is how he put it. He said, I told Joe my story, and when it was over, 45 minutes later, Joe asked if he could pray for me. And I said, yeah, I want you to. And so Joe took a deep breath, a long exhale, and then a long pause. And then he prayed. And he said, I don't remember what he prayed, but I remember that God spoke to me in that deep breath and that pause. So let me tell you who Joe Chambers is to me. He's the pastor of the pause. That's not who I used to be. I have answers to questions no one's even asking. And so what soul care has done for me, I think, has caused me to slow down the internal pace of my life and to be present with people and to not be afraid of the silence that sometimes hangs between us.
I love it. I don't think there's anything else to say after what you just said. It's just beautiful. The pastor of the pause. Matt, you're becoming that. I don't know that many people know how to pause. So we could all use some of that. So if the Soul Care Institute was an invitation into something, what is it inviting people into?
I feel like it's inviting people into understanding the kingdom within you. That Jesus, said the kingdom of heaven is at hand. The kingdom of heaven is within you. Somebody has said it this way, that if you really want to know God, you better learn to know yourself. And so one of the things that I think the invitation of the Soul Care Institute is to get to know yourself so that you can get to know the God who lives inside you. And you can't do that without slowing down, coming to a stop, Shabbat, and slowing your pace, pausing, paying attention to your own soul. And when you do that, you'll find God already there in the deeper part of you. And that's a beautiful thing to find.
It is. And just hearing and imagining what it might feel like to go on that journey of discovering the kingdom within. I've started appreciating soul care. I've started reading the books. I've started having conversations, but this journey that I'm about to begin it's just exciting to think of what's ahead and there's so much more to see and to find and hear from God on.
Yeah, and let me just add this. When it comes to soul care, you can read content anywhere. You can read it in books, and you can listen to podcasts, and you can get the information. That's not what the Soul Care Institute, it's part of what it does, but that's not the strength. The strength of the Institute is that when you go with pilgrims who are on the same search and you have guides, it's in the community and the shared conviviality and the shared sacrament over a meal and the laughter that comes from that and going in the same direction. That's where your soul deepens. It's not about knowledge, it's about the journey that you're on for 6 retreats with people that will be your friends for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I love that so much. Is there anything else that comes to mind if you think about someone you care about that you would want them to consider joining a cohort? What would you tell them?
I think I would tell them this will stretch you in areas of your life you did not know you needed to be stretched. You will discover parts of yourself you didn't know were there. And when you discover that, you're going to probably discover the grace of God in ways you never knew you needed to know either. And so I, without any hesitation, would invite, in fact, I have invited and sent many people to the Soul Care Institute because I think it can change lives. One soul at a time, for sure.
Well, it has been such a joy to get to hear your story and to hear your really insightful just thoughts on soul care in general and your experiences of the community and your memories of retreats. I just thank you so much for your time to share with us.
It's been my privilege. All God's best for you.
Thank you so much, Joe.
You've been listening to Soul Care Institute Reflections with Jessie Vangsness. I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you have questions or would just love to talk to someone, please feel free to contact us by going to our website, soulcareinstitute.com. We hope to hear from you.